Welcome to tape number 5 in our series on Jeet Kune scientific street fighting. My name is Beasley and I'll be your instructor for this series. Now in tape number 4, we introduced the first 5 levels of full contact fighting. In this tape we're going to look at levels 6 through 9 where we start putting in the head work and making a little more contact. We'll begin with some of our evasive maneuvers, the slipping, the bobbing, the weaving, as we introduce the full contact fighting system known as Junfan kickboxing. The first technique we want to look at is how to slip the punch. Now in this tape we're going to start hitting to the head. Once you hit to the head, things get kind of rough. So you want to make sure that you can move your head out of the way. And the first technique is the slip. Ian? Yeah, just give me a left lead here. Now when I throw out the jab, he doesn't want to take that full force, obviously. So what he wants to be able to do is either move back or down or over. In this case we're going to try to slip. Now slipping means that we just slide by it, to slip it past us. So as the punch comes out, he wants to slightly move over outside. Now he's better off stepping to the outside here because now he's got a right cross that he can punch me with, and he has other techniques to use. So as I step in, he wants to move out of the way. And you can practice this routine just like this with a partner. Just have your partner move out of the way there. Now you can also slip to the inside. If you slip to the inside, you're in danger of a right cross. But if you slip to the inside, you'll have to quickly move, that is bob up and under. Okay, so as you move around, I'm just going to have Ian slip to the outside each time, and I'll just move around through some techniques. Now as you practice this, be very telegraphic. You don't need to fake or anything. Just practice going out just like that. And if you would, stand still, just aim right there at the forehead. So if you do make some contact, it won't be too rough on your partner. Okay, so we have our hands up. I'm just going to fire out a few shots while Ian goes. Now this puts him under a lot of pressure because he knows he could possibly get hit with this. And you just want to work just like that. Now you want to get it down to where you're making as little motion as possible. Just as little motion as possible for your slipping type of technique. And anytime you miss the slip, you should take your right hand up as a parry motion. Now that means turning the palm out, and as the punch comes in, it'll just hit that palm. So as I just put your left hand down for a second. So as I punch, you can just parry like that. And you don't actually need to slip, or you can prepare for the slip. But this is just a parry motion, which the hand is just going to come up like that. And now go from the parry to the slip. Okay, just slip it. That's it. Slip it. All right, now parry. Good. Parry and slip. And slip and parry and slip. All right, now one way to begin practice for the slipping technique is to have the person punch directly at your head. Now Ian, just reach out and touch the forehead. Okay, and you can try that a couple times, touch, and get your partner to do it nice and easy. And you get used to that punch coming right at you, and then punch. It's just a little slip aside. See, it's just a little motion. You want to bend your knees slightly as you do this, but basically you're just letting your head go. As he's punching, I'm just going right beside of it, just like that. Right beside of it. Okay? And sometimes I'll parry the technique, and a lot of times I'll reach out and kind of stop the technique before it comes in at me. But basically, if you'll start, just touch the forehead here. If you'll just start with the forehead, and now punch, and punch me right here in the forehead, punch again. See how you can start slipping? Just like that. Okay, just getting used to moving slightly away. Now Ian, let's try that. I'm going to throw the technique at you. I'm just going to hit you right there first. Don't move at all. That's it. And now slip slightly. Good, that's it. So you want to just build up your timing to where you feel comfortable with that. All right, now let's go back to the parry, because the parry is the same motion except for you didn't get your head out of the way, so use the parry. And sometimes when you feel like you're not too threatened by it, then go ahead and do the full slip. That's it. Now you don't want to move too far because continually you're slipping so that you can set up your next technique. So slipping is both getting out of the way and also preparing yourself to follow up with another offensive maneuver. So once again, if we start the slipping technique, you want to have just a slight motion like this. And as slight as you can do the motion, the better off you are. And I'm just kind of dipping down a little with my knees as I move back like this for the slipping technique. And we'll try another technique next. So we can slip or we can parry. Now, in addition to slipping, a good way to set up the slipping is to start bobbing. Bobbing means that we're just bobbing up and down. That's all. Just bending the knees, going up and back, just like that. The chin is kept in somewhat, shoulders come up for protection, and we just start bobbing back and forth, and along with the bobbing, that momentum, we slip. Bob and slip. Bob and slip, just like that. Ian, let's give that a try. First of all, let's see why you want to continually be doing the bobbing and the slipping. Ian, if you'll hit my hand, hit it again. Anytime you have a stationary target, it's easy to hit, but the minute that target starts moving, it becomes a little more difficult to make contact. So if your hit is stationary, if you practice perhaps a classical martial art, for example, and your hit is stationary, which looks terrific in form, well, it's easy to hit. So that's the reason we want to start moving that hit around back and forth. So let's look at the bobbing first of all. That's bending the knees and coming up just basically vertical. And the reason he's doing that is because it makes it a little more difficult for me to get set. See, I have to get set and try to catch his timing. Now, once I get set to catch the timing, then he's going to slip the technique. See, so he's going to work the slip right off of the bobbing technique. The slip right off of the bobbing technique. That's it. Good. And he's just moving just like that. And so once again, we want to start bobbing up and down, moving the head around. You'll see some people moving back and forth with the upper body. That's not a good way to do it, but at least it's motion. You want to have as little motion as possible here. Just little dipping type of techniques here. You don't have to go too far. It's just a slight little motion. And this bobbing both makes it difficult for your opponent to fix on your head, and also it sets up for you a little slipping technique. So it's much more practical for you to slip than to stand there and try to block the technique. As we parry to try to evade a punch thrown at the head, as we slip and we bob up and down, we now want to introduce weaving. Now, weaving allows us to weave inside and outside the opponent's offense. For the weaving, we want to just kind of come down, and it's almost like we're making a U with the head. A U, right, like this. A U with the head, just like that. And we're just bending the knees and weaving back and forth. Now we're also bobbing. This is bobbing. This is just a more dramatized form of bobbing. But sometimes we'll weave really low. When you do that, try not to turn your head down, but keep looking up at all times, even if you're going very low to get underneath a punch. Ian? If you'll just throw a light little jab up. See, I may come way down low here to throw my technique. Now that is weaving in and out of the opponent. Okay, so I am both parrying the technique, punch. I'm going to slip the technique. I'm going to bob up and down and weave in and out of the opponent's offense. So let's go through that. Okay, first of all, let's do the parry. And off of a parry, we get a slip. And off of the slip, we get the bobbing. And when we have a little more, a stronger motion, we get some weaving in and out. Weaving in, weaving out. Weaving in, weaving out. Just like that. Now, when you're practicing with your partner, you'll have that tendency, because they'll stop, to go ahead and hit them, but that doesn't service them at all. So you want to just kind of move the techniques back and forth, nice and slow. You just look at that forehead, right up at the top of their headgear, and you aim right at it, and just let your partner do the techniques. Then they can practice moving in and out there. Now, in addition to the bobbing up and down, we can start putting the shoulders into it. The shoulders can come back and forth. Ian, one sec. Okay, the shoulders come back and forth, punch nice and easy, like this. See, my shoulder can come in and just stop the technique right there. In fact, we have what we call a shoulder roll. Sometimes if he punches, I'll bring that shoulder out just like that, rolling back, especially against the right cross. If he comes in, I'll just roll it over like that. Sometimes you'll see people really overdo a shoulder roll. Punch, and they'll go all the way over like this. Okay? You can do that if you can get away with it. If you're doing kickboxing, then chances are the person's going to follow through with a technique which will catch you in the act there. So we want to have short little motions. Your shoulder roll should be a short little roll. That's all. Little circle there. Simple and direct. That's Jeet Kune. Okay, so we can start moving in and out and using those shoulders. Also, we start using some body shifting here. The body shifting works when the arms are moving back and forth. Continually, I'm taking these targets. This is the targets, the center line here, and I'm taking the center line out of position against my opponent. So as the punches are coming in, instead of hitting me straight, I'm just letting them roll off to one side or roll off to the other side. Even if you'll throw a few punches right at the stomach here, I'll show what I'm talking about. Punch. See, I'm making sure that I don't catch a straight blow. See what I'm doing? I'm just kind of twisting the body somewhat. So as I'm punching, I'll be doing the same thing with the head. The head will be moving back and forth. And sometimes people watch that and they say, well, you're just moving around a little. But each one has its own use. In other words, you're bobbing, weaving, shifting, changing position, continually taking your target out of the line of fire. You want to deny access to your targets at all times. That's a very important part of the fight, is not getting hit. If you get hit, you get hurt. If you're going to box, you are going to get hit. Just don't get hurt. And how do you not get hurt? Continually putting your body in an inaccessible manner so that even if you get tagged somewhat, it rolls off. If you watch a professional fight, you'll see that the boxers are getting hit all the time, but they don't get hit by standing still, typically. But when they get hit, they're rolling. Their head is moving. Their shoulders are moving back and forth. And that's what you have to do if you're going to be competent at the full contact. In our tape on mobility, we talked about the pivot step, the ability to move around as the opponent comes in. When you start making that full contact to the head, you have to have a way in which you can step and then get quickly away from the opponent. Beasley footwork. Ian, just one second. I'm just kind of reviewing it this time, really. As my opponent throws the punch in and I step out, what I'm going to do is take my hand and just pop up and pivot out of the way. Walk right over there. Okay? So as he comes in, I'll find myself here quite a bit. And when I'm in, after I've slipped the technique, as his elbow comes back, I can take this hand and place it right under the elbow. I can switch positions, and now I'm ready. If I'm in close like this, I don't want to have too much distance. In close, I just pivot right out of the way on my opponent. So if he's throwing a technique and I've moved out of the way and I get in tight, now at this point, of course, I don't want to be punching. But let's say that he quickly pulled his hands back and he came in also and we've locked up here. Instead of standing and just pushing back and forth, what I'm going to do is switch step, and I want to step in close here, and I'll end up right behind my opponent. That's what I'm trying to do, is end up right behind the opponent. In one more time. And you'll see this quite a bit. Once I move in, I'll step out. See what I did with the feet? I switched position, and I pivot just right out of the way, just like that. Okay, so as you're practicing the boxing techniques, the full contact fighting, you want to make sure that you're able to use this pivot step as well. Now, before we get into the actual sparring, I want to first go over some of the equipment that we need. A mouthpiece is essential. Now, I like these little flexible type that you get used to. They don't choke you, you don't gag on them, and they're nice to work with. Okay, you also need to start taping up the hands. Now you can just get a wrap, put it around the hands. If you're going to start hitting a little bit harder, you need something like that. Shin guards. Okay, shin and instep protectors. This will go on top of the foot. This works really terrific because you get some good protection on that. Boxing gloves. Now these, of course, are just bag gloves really, but I'm shooting a video, and so as a result, I'm not going to be wearing all the gear I should be wearing. But you'll need to get at least 16, perhaps even 18 ounce. There are a lot of manufacturers that put out some really good gloves. I would start with 16, and I wouldn't hesitate to get 18-ounce gloves. The larger the glove, the more protection for your hand, which is important, and also the concussion is distributed a little bit more over the full size of the hand, so the person doesn't take quite the beating that they would unless you had the smaller gloves. In fact, they use the smaller gloves in a professional boxing match so that the person doesn't take as much abuse. He gets knocked out quickly and as a result lives to fight another day. And headgear. Now, there are a lot of people that have all sorts of headgear. I would just get a piece of headgear here, the typical boxing type of headgear. Once you develop the ability to slip and make the maneuvers, this is all you want. You don't want a motorcycle helmet or some of these other big with full glass fronts. You're just not going to get hurt that much. If you're wearing boxing gloves and you know what you're doing and you take step by step, that's the reason in tape 4 we graded them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and now we're ready for number 6, which is basically boxing. Now, we can incorporate the Jeet Kune, the rally, the straight blast, or what we sometimes call the blitz. We can do lead hand. We can work on all of our techniques, and we're going to give that a try right now. We're ready to start level number 6. Now, this includes punching to the body and to the head. Now, whenever you're sparring, you need to have a mouthpiece. I'm trying to make a videotape. It's hard to talk with a mouthpiece in, so I'm going to be sparring without a mouthpiece. As a result, my partner's not going to be hitting quite as hard as he normally would, and I won't be hitting quite so hard either. You want to be in a position to where you can use a lot of contact or light contact, but ultimately, the more control you have, the better off you are. Ian, come on out. Okay, as we start moving, I'm just going to show you some of the slipping type of techniques that we've been working on. I want to be able to move the head back and forth here, and I'm just lightly going. Ian, you got to try to hit me here, or otherwise I won't have anything to do. That's it, nice and easy. And you can see I'm moving back and forth here as we're punching. And once you start incorporating the head, you have to watch the rest of the body as well. And some of the techniques I like to work on. Well, let's start with this. As we begin with the head and body, remember I can strike to the body or I can strike to the head. As I'm moving around, I want to just kind of snap out a jab. Now that's my initial technique. I just want to kind of get a feel for it. Sometimes if you're sparring someone you don't know, and actually Ian and I have never sparred before, but it's not a bad idea to throw out a good power jab that says to the opponent that I know what I'm doing, that let's go ahead and make some contact here, don't get too excited. But in this case, where this is kind of buddy sparring, in other words, we're just kind of going at it to learn not to destroy the opponent. So as we move around here, we're just kind of sticking out some light little punches. Okay? And as I said in level 2, punching, I'll always start with my jab, establish the lead hand. Now, Bruce Lee thought a lot about lead hand techniques. In fact, he was an advocate of the boxing. And you can see that the lead hand will stop the person from a standing position and make them much more wary as you're punching. Now, once you get the jab down, there goes the hook. Now, the hook is just a reflection. If you're in close, you can keep the elbow for the hook in tight. And if you need that distance and you feel comfortable with it, you can actually make that hook work for you. And feel free to switch sides, switch positions. You'll have certain targets here on unmatched sides. Let me show you. If you slow down just a little, Ian.
Okay, when I'm on unmatched sides, in other words, when I have my right lead and he has his left lead, what I can do is just come right over the shoulder there with a fast little hook. It makes it a little more difficult for him to see it because his arm's up. So I just kind of come up and a quick little hook, little snapping hook is a terrific technique. Now sometimes I'll take that hook and I'll just hit the forward hand and pull it down, and I might try that a couple times. I'll see what his reaction is going to be. When I capture a reaction for him, I'll just set it up. Now I'm using a progressive indirect attack. You have to understand the strategies in order to make the kickboxing work for you. If you don't understand the strategies and you're not constantly applying them and constantly cognizant of what's going on, you're missing the Jeet Kune Do. The Jeet Kune Do is not about knowing all these different techniques from all sorts of sources, but rather knowing a few techniques and being able to apply them under different circumstances. If I try to use my hook and my hook doesn't work for me in a simple direct attack, then I want to set it up so that maybe I'm drawing the person in. As he punches, then I'll counter punch over top of that. Maybe I want to draw him out by throwing some techniques down and then following through. Maybe I want to immobilize the arm and then make the technique work for me. And perhaps I want to go to even a more sophisticated method of progressive indirect, in which I'm kind of changing up the speed, changing up the rhythm in order to get my opponent. And of course I can also use it in combinations, okay, by putting together combinations. So continually as you spar, you have to think in terms of spatial relationship here, how close you are. You have to think in terms of what the punches and the kicks that you want to use. And continually you're thinking in terms of the strategy. How do you apply that? Remember, you can increase your speed, you can increase your power, and you can increase your deceptiveness. And that's what we have to do. Now this deceptive quality comes in by our evasive footwork, and it also comes in by our ways of attack, the 5 ways of attack. And this is extremely important because once again, when we look at Jeet Kune Do, it's not a series of a lot of techniques or flowery interpretations, but rather a few simple techniques that you learn to apply. You have to pick them up. The principles of Jeet Kune Do are such that regardless of what art you're using, even if I were trying to do karate techniques, I still apply those 5 ways of attack. I can punch him simple direct. I can use it in combination. I could use it by drawing the person in or drawing the person out. That is, making him move in a certain direction so that I hit him. That's body faking. Okay? Or I can change the rhythm or speed, progressive indirect attack, or use it in combinations or hand immobilization or foot immobilization. So regardless of the art that you perform, whether it's jiu-jitsu or karate or kung fu or Jeet Kune Do, the principles are the same, the strategy is the same. And that's what the Junfan kickboxing is about. It's learning the techniques first and then making the techniques work. And if you don't have on headgear and you're not boxing and you have to do this in self-defense, come on in here, Ian. Okay, this is self-defense. It doesn't change. You might not stand there, throw a jab, and allow the person to hit you. You don't want to take a punch to give a punch. That's a bad theory anyway. Okay, but in terms of just moving the body and knowing what to do, you get that by gloving up, putting on the equipment, and going to it. And the best way to do that, and the reason a lot of people fail at it, is they'll start off right here. And this is not a good way to start it off. You need to start with just the techniques like we did in tape 4, then a little to the body, kicking, punching, trap boxing, and such. So right now we're just kind of throwing some techniques, doing our basic boxing type of technique. And I'm doubling up and I'm throwing the techniques and I'm just working back and forth. And you notice that as I do these techniques, I'm not being too violent. I know my opponent is not really trying to work me too hard because he thinks I'm trying to talk here and not use up too much energy. But I'm moving around, sitting up, using these techniques. Now, you don't always want to be a head hunter, always going for the head, because then you kill the body, you kill the fighter. So you can see what we're doing here. And I'm going right back to the basics of being evasive first of all. If he can't hit me, he can't hurt me. And then there was a parry technique that I just used. And the minute I catch him holding back, then I'll go in on him just like that. Now I can fight off one side or the other. Doesn't really matter. They both work just fine. I'm certainly an advocate of developing both sides as a strong side, as opposed to just saying you have to fight off right or left. Either side works fine and gives you twice the options. I'm going to see if I can't put in the rally. You can't just come out and make a technique work. You have to have the opportunity for it. My hands got kind of tied up on his gloves that time. But you can see this continual motion back and forth on my opponent as he works. And again, whenever I get in trouble, I'll use that lead hand. I'll establish position with that lead hand. Now this is really kind of my straight blast right there. And that jab, that lead hand, as Bruce Lee talked about, is an important part of your Jeet Kune Do. And you can learn to do that, just like he and I are doing here, by putting on some gloves and going at it. You don't have to go too hard. You make a little more contact. It's a lot of fun, really. I hope you enjoy it. If you're going to box, you're going to get hit. It's that simple. No one comes out here, puts on the gear, and doesn't get hit at all. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. Now, every boxer will tell you it's not fun to get hit in the head. So you want to make sure that you're slipping, that you're moving, that you're being evasive, not to the extent that you can't use your weapons, but to the extent that you don't get hurt. And also work with a partner that's not out trying to kill you. It's not fun to come out here full contact and work through a guy that's trying to take your head off. So take it step by step. At some points you may be ready to do that, and it's worthwhile to test yourself, to get some people that you haven't sparred before, to go full contact with the intent of, let's see what happens. But generally, if a person is serious about their sparring, they feel good about it. If you get hit, no one gets upset, no one gets mad, no one throws their gloves down and runs off. You just have to take it step by step until you feel comfortable with it. And if you are testing yourself and you want to get in a good boxer, kickboxer, and go a few rounds with them, that's okay too. But remember, a lot of it is mental disposition. You have to remain cool and calm. If you get tagged, you can't let that overpower your thoughts. You've got to be thinking about your strategy. What do you want to do? Channel your energy into something positive. Now, once again, whenever you spar using the head, you need to have a headgear on. I talk to some people sometimes and they say, oh yeah, we kickbox, and the first thing I say is, what type of headgear do you use? And if they don't use a headgear, they're not kickboxing. No one's going to come out here and seriously try it without putting on some good headgear. And generally, if you've done it a lot, you want something light that works for you. You also need to have a mouthpiece. Now, we're shooting a film. I'm not going to have a mouthpiece in so that I can talk, and Ian's not going to be trying to hit me in the mouth area, if that's possible, so that I can continue to talk as we go through here. In this round, we're going to look at the boxing and the trap boxing. Now, I use the word trap boxing to denote the grappling aspects of boxing. In other words, boxing is hitting with the hands, but the minute you get in and tighten up and hold on, that's when the referee tells you to stop. Well, when you hold on, that's when you have all the opportunities to do your knees and elbows and punches and things like that. Now, we're not protected for elbows or knees, so we're not going to do that right now. But we are going to do some of the upper stand-up grappling and perhaps some sweeps if they become available. When you're doing this free form or freestyle, it's not like I can say, give me a jab and then I can show you 15 techniques. It's not like I can say, throw a kick and then I can show you all the techniques and how I could do it. I just don't know what he's going to throw at me, so I just have to work on the energy that he presents. But I'll see if I can't get in some of the sweeps and takedowns as we go through it. Ian, come on in. Okay, I'm just going to kind of talk it through here the first few times. Remember, you want to establish your jab, your lead hand technique. It's extremely important that you get that going. That's the first rule for your kickboxing. Make sure that you have that hand out there, and then you can see what your partner is going to do. I can see he's a slipper. I can see that he's trying to be evasive as he does that. Now, I'm just going to do this slow. But once I get him in tight here, now I'm getting into the trap boxing range. My first priority is to put my hand on his neck. If I can control the neck, I can control the body. It's not like I'm going to try to stand out here and work on these weapons because they're moving too fast. But if I can get my hand on the head like this, around the neck, I can pull him in. If I pull him in, now watch what happens. Even though he's throwing some punches into the ribs, he's not going to hurt me. There's no going to be any pain there. Go ahead and throw a few in there. Okay, and if he tries to go up to the head, go up to the head. Again, I've just got my shoulder and my elbow in for protection. When he does it a couple of times, throw some more, I'll just come over and capture that arm. Once I've captured the arm, I know that he only has this hand left. He's got to work with that hand. He might try headbutt, he might try knee, but I'm staying in so that even if he tries that, he's not going to be effective with it. Okay, so what he's going to have to do, he has no choice if we're doing the boxing, primarily the hands, he's going to have to position his head out so that I can't just continue to hit him. And then in desperation, he's going to take that hand. The minute he does it, I'm going to tie him up, and now I just get to sit back and let him fight. Go ahead and try to get out of that. And sometimes I might throw in a little jabbing technique, just low like that. If we were doing elbows and knees, I'd have him wide open there, so it'd be easy to take him out. And what I'm going to try to do at this point in trap boxing is manipulate my hands so that now I control both arms. Once I control both arms, there's nothing he can do. Now remember, he has on a headgear, so this isn't really hurting him at all as I do that. Okay? So at this point, again, it's easy to take him down and follow through. All right, so let's see if we can't move around with a few techniques. And I'll try to keep talking as I'm doing these back and forth. Right back here. Now the trap boxing also includes sweeps and takedowns. We didn't really gear up for that. But you can see they're very effective. Let me just show you what I did. I just called him over here and I just took my foot and lifted just like that. And it's hard to stand up when one foot is in the air and the other's not. So we're just moving around back and forth. And sometimes I'll position here. Sometimes I'll come over here and hit. And whenever, let me show you what I did there. I came down and I found myself in an awkward position. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to go from here. I've got an overhand right I could throw. I can throw a hook into the body. But basically the defense that I went for was to bridge the gap, to get in close enough so that any punch that he was able to throw wouldn't have a lot of power. When you're back here throwing your punches, there's a lot of power on that. When that connects, somebody gets hurt. But when you're in tight, when someone hits, it doesn't typically hurt that much. If you ever watch some of the reality fighting events, you'll notice that people don't stay at this range very long. Now, one of the reasons for that is if you get tagged out here, it's going to hurt a lot. So immediately they want to go into grapples. They want to get in and hold on to the person. As you do that, if you will establish control of the neck, and if the person tries to sweep and tries to do a takedown on you, you've just got to keep their head back. You've got to push back on it. And remember, you can drive the hand back and then follow through like that for the trap boxing. So as we do trap boxing, it includes moving around, hanging on. Now, let me just take the gloves off for 1 second and show you how you incorporate your actual trapping techniques, since we've used this quite often. Trapping, give me a right lead, as is typically taught. Reference point, trap and hit. Okay, but if we're both standing there, everything works terrific. But what happens when he's coming back and forth and those hands are snapping back and forth? Okay, there's no pak sows, no lop sows. It just isn't available to me. So now what I have to do with my trapping is go back into the trap boxing using my boxing techniques to temporarily trap and to hit. And also, I can still use the same type of techniques. Now look what I did. I pulled the right hand down, the left hand over, and that was my little entry that we worked on in our tramping tape. A little entry here, and once I'm there, boom, I'm in position to take my opponent down. You all right, Ian? That's a little rough there. Okay, so I come in, 1, 2, and then boom, I'm ready to work on him. So go ahead and throw some shots, head, whatever. And you can see that, boom, boom, we're now in a terrific position to work the opponent, either in a grappling context, a striking context, or whatever I want to do there. Even if I know an art like Aikido, I can make those work, those become applicable, if I know about the trapping. But it's not the hands. Okay? Anyone can work the hands and do all those techniques. It's this spatial relationship. It's that ability to move forward and back, throw some punches. This is where it's at. And you don't get that unless you put on the gloves and you try it. Now, of course, I could throw elbows in tight like that. I can throw knees. But I pick it up by learning these techniques. There was my straight blast. It's easy to throw it if you'll learn the footwork. In Jeet Kune, mobility is definitely stressed, says the founder, Bruce Lee. And you can see why, because this is the context this is the context in which you learn all of the techniques, the strategy, the principles, everything works once you take an opportunity to put on some gear and go full contact.
I had mentioned in an earlier tape that we have a principle in the science of physical activity called specificity of exercise. The way that you practice is the way you're going to perform. That's the reason that it becomes so important to put this full contact into your sparring. If you don't do it, it's easy to figure out that I can use this technique and I can use that technique, but unless you get out here and you try it, you just don't know what works and what doesn't. And more so than the technique is that spatial awareness, that ability to see the opponent, to know when to throw the technique and when not to throw the technique. Plus, you'll learn a lot by getting out here and going on the mat. For example, anytime you line up, come here, Ian, against a fighter, you're going to find out 3 aggressive types. The first type of fighter that you come up to, you may have what we call a runner. Now, this comes out of the old karate competitions back in the 60s. Joe Louis was the first person to teach Jeet Kune on a national basis, international basis, in fact. He learned from Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee encouraged him to say that it was Jeet Kune, and certainly he told people where he received the information. But he went out in 1968 on a national circuit teaching these principles. And so these principles have been in the karate, taekwondo sport community for 20-some years now. So it's not new to a lot of people. But these principles still apply to anything that we do. First of all, if you are fighting a person and you see that they're a runner, every time I try to hit him, he takes off. Just move back out of the way. He's a runner. Okay, that's what we call him. And he won't let me get to him. Okay, those people, you can't really use a direct attack, a simple direct attack. If you attempt to use a simple direct attack, he's out of there. He wants to get away from you. He's running. He's the type of fighter. And Ian's obviously not a runner because you're not doing a good job of running out of the way. But he's the type of fighter that's going to be continually moving back and forth. He's over here. He's over there. If you try to approach that type of a fighter with a simple direct attack or some type of an entry, he's gone. He's out of there. Okay, so you kind of have to use a fake. You have to draw him in, attack by drawing. You have to draw him out, see what he's going to do, or get him to come into you. So if you understand the fighting game here, then you start putting those 5 ways of attack together with these 3 aggressive type of tapes. Now, some people are going to be the runners. They're going to run away everywhere. They're going to be the counter fighters. You'll also come across a type of fighter that's a blocker. So we call a blocker. Every time you throw something, he tries to block it. He's just out there. He's going to try to block everything you throw. There are some arts that they'll just stand there and they'll start blocking everything. Okay? If you have a blocker, of course, if you try to do an indirect attack that is use a fake, then he's going to go for it. He's going to try to shoot for that type of a blocking maneuver.
A lot of people that practice trapping, that's what they're doing. Their hands are continually moving back and forth. Sometimes that works if you're using these small little blocking type of techniques, but anytime you find yourself reaching out, then be aware of the fact that a lot of fighters know that you're going to be a blocker, and they'll know the strategy of how to defeat the blocker. It's the same as if you know he's going to be a puncher and you're a grappler, terrific. You enter down below his weapons. If he's going to be a kicker and you're going to be a puncher, you know you've got to get inside of the kicks in order to make your punches work. Now, when you get out and actually try it, this information will come to you really fast. So we have a runner, we have a blocker, and we have what we call a grappler. A jammer is the typical word. Whenever you start to work with him, he's coming at you. He's in your face. He wants to get there. Now, you can't really fake a jammer. If you try to fake a jammer, he's in there. So your fake is all that's done is brought him in there to you. Okay, so there are different types of techniques you want to use against a faker, and we'll talk about that in a later tape series perhaps. But be aware of the fact that you should be able to watch your fighter, watch your partner, and immediately determine, does this guy, when I start to throw a technique, does he take off? This guy, when I start to throw a technique, does he jam in? This guy, when I throw a technique, does he try to block everything? Because if you know that's the style of fighting that he has, then that tells you a lot on the strategy that you want to use to defeat him. And you have to get out and work these techniques back and forth in order to pick it up. Now, self-defense, we call this Jeet Kune, scientific street fighting. Scientific principles, meaning trial and error. We're going to try this out and see if it works. If you're out here in a situation where maybe someone's taught you to throw a reverse punch, and you decide to throw that reverse punch and it doesn't work for you, then by trial and error, you learn, you develop some empirical information here that says to you, don't do it that way. Don't go try to protect your hip, protect your face, punch up high. If you think you can move in and throw a technique and follow through and hit, well, that's fine. Try it right here where the guy is actually trying to get to you and see if it works for you or not. So if you think that your kicking and punching defeats the grappler, try the grappler. Remember, kick the kicker, box the boxer, grapple the grappler. And when you can use no particular way as your way, then that's what we call Jeet Kune, the way of no way. So as we try and go into the next few levels here, we're going to look at, in this next level, punching and kicking to the body and to the head. Now in Jeet Kune, we really don't stress any high kicks. But when you're practicing, we're going to go ahead and throw some just as we move around and do these routines. So next up, I'm going to gear up. We're going to try some full contact head and face. After you feel comfortable with each level, let's add a few more variables to it. This time, we're going to be kicking at the head as well as at the body. We haven't tried that so far. Ian, come on out. Now, you'll find that, once again, in Jeet Kune Do, the head kicks aren't stressed very much, but if you can do it, why not do it? Okay? One of the kicks that I like to use a lot is this front kind of a stomping kick, a stamping kick sometimes it's called, perning kick sometimes. You just come in and you throw it right into the face like that. And you can really get a lot of people on that. Just kind of come straight in and stomps right into the face. Now, in addition to kicking to the face, we really haven't looked at the leg kicks. A lot of people like to use this kick to the thigh like that. They like to pick up and kick down to the thigh. And certainly over a period of time that wears the person down, and it's an excellent technique for just continual practice. If I'm kicking to the legs, I like to use those little snappy kicks that I showed in tape 1 that in reality do a lot more damage. You're really blasting into the leg and really hurting the leg. So as I do these little oblique kicks and little stopping kicks like that, I'm using the exact same technique as if I were doing a side kick to the knee or a little ball of the foot inside of the thigh or to the groin. And of course, if you're going to do this type of sparring, you need some groin protection on. Okay, so we're going to move around just a little, and you can at least start getting your legs into it and start working. Now, sometimes people will prefer a side kick or a right side fighting position versus the left side. One technique that I have found very effective, let me show it slow, is to move in, get the person to put that head over. See, here's all the firepower, so they go for a place where it's safe, and then you just use that inverted hook kick, boom, right up. And I tend to use that quite a bit. So here we are, moving around, and I like to stick out those oblique kicks. It works just like a jab. It says to my opponent, watch out, there's something down there. You have to watch out for it, and lo and behold, that opened up the stomach, and I took that shot. Okay, so as we move around here, just working back and forth with our partner, throwing the kicks and the punches. Now, Ian's a Tang Sudo specialist, so he's quite capable of kicking up to the face. I've asked him not to hit me in the mouth, because then I won't be able to talk and tell you what I'm doing here. But you can see the technique. Now let me show you what I did that time. I started to throw a front kick, but I found he was in too close. If I had extended it out, he would have just jammed the technique. So instead I put it down and picked up an oblique kick. Okay, now what I did, by putting it down, if I just put my kick down, then he would have rushed right in to get me. And I was in an awkward position. So I saved the day for that by simply coming back with a short little kick that gave me the opportunity to hit him and stop his attack. And again, these aren't the type of things that you can just teach. I mean, we can't just say, okay, fake and hit, ready, fake and hit, because you can't be sure of the energy that your partner is going to give you. Sometimes he'll put a lot of power into it, sometimes he doesn't. Now, Ian tends to vary between being a blocker and a jammer. He tends to want to get in on it, which is terrific, because that means every simple direct attack that I throw is going to make some contact there, and it makes it easier for me to hit. I personally don't like to fight runners. They're easy to second guess, but still yet, when you're just in here moving around and having fun, there's no need for it. Now, one of the kicks that I like to throw sometimes is this oblique kick. Now watch how I set it up. I'll fake one and then throw up this oblique kick right into the stomach. And this is a very powerful kick because it has the body behind it. And the minute I get a person to start thinking about the kicks, then boom, I'm going for the head with the punches. That's it. Whenever you throw a kick, you want to make sure that you get it back to the floor. And you notice that in our stance, we're really not in position to throw that stomping side kick. Sometimes I'll pull that out if I'm really frustrated, or if I've got an opponent that's really throwing some power at me. I'll step in and throw that driving side kick. And there's not many people that can just stand there when you throw it. When you throw it to connect, again, you want to go ahead and move. You're fighting. When you're throwing it to connect, you got to get the person thinking, and then boom. So I'm continually going upstairs with it, upstairs, and then slipping that side kick. And after I've done that a few times, watch what happens. There's my side kick, and 100% open up the high line for me. See, the minute I threw it in a couple of times, okay, a couple of times, and then I faked it. In other words, I drew his hands down, attacked by drawing, I drew his hands down, opened up the high line for me to hit. Okay, still going. And remember, this little oblique kick here has the same type of properties as a jab in that it stops the person in their tracks. It irritates. It makes the person think. Okay, now let me show you something that just came up. As he was coming in on me, I tried to stop him with the oblique, tried to irritate him. He still wants to jam, get a piece of me. He caught me like this, and so my defense really didn't have anything that I could throw, so my defense was to use the space, use the distance. As he came in with a punch, I just stepped back out of the way. So I use distance as my defense. It's hard to hit a person that's not there, and it's an excellent defense to use. And again, try not to have one side that you have to use. You want to be strong to use both sides. Okay, stop just a second. All right, remember our theme, using no way as the only way. Now let's say that I thought I could only throw a hook by pulling it in tight like this. But what you saw just happen when he leaned his head forward like that, I had to come way out here and throw my hook. Now should you say, oh, terrible technique. Oh, you don't know what you're doing. Oh, that's not Jeet Kune Do. Absolutely not, because in this art, anything that works is what we're looking for. Okay, the right technique is the technique that scores. And so once again, the Jeet Kune Do man should be just kind of picking shots. He needs to work speed. He needs to work power. Those are the attributes that you can pick up by going to the gym and building some strength. And he needs to work his deceptiveness. And when he has that, then everything starts to work. All of his techniques start to work. Even the straight blast, which isn't that easy to make happen. But you just get used to it. Now, I'm going to set up a progressive indirect attack here. And here's how I did it. I started out this hooking kick, round kick up high, and just changed the direction and changed the speed on it. Okay, you saw that it started up high here. Okay, and so I changed the direction on it, and I also changed the speed. I started out slow and then speeded it up. Progressive indirect attack. And when you're out here fighting, you're continually thinking of what you're doing. Are you blocking, jamming, running? Are you using distance, evasive footworks? Are you establishing your lead hand? Are you doing a rally, just overpowering a blitz? We sometimes call that. It's not about this technique and that technique. It's rather about the delivery of technique. Well, we're all geared up here and we're ready to go for this final level, phase number 9 in our kicking, punching, trap boxing, full contact. Now, before I really get into it, let me just mention some of the spinning kicks. Spinning kicks are very popular for a lot of people. I typically don't do a lot of them because I want to maintain that position for blasting the rally, the blitz there. Now, if you're throwing a spinning kick, there's no reason why something like a spinning back kick can't be very effective for you. A lot of people like to throw what's called a spinning hook kick. You can get very fancy with it, but then again, we're kind of getting away from the simple, direct Jeet Kune Do by stepping around and hooking back at our opponent. That becomes very effective. Give me a right lead. Sometimes you'll see people stepping in and they'll spin around and hit like that. Kind of a spinning outward or inward crescent. Those things are effective, but I wouldn't put a lot of store in them for self-defense. And what we're trying to do here is maintain techniques that are good for self-defense. Now, as far as the leg kicks are concerned, my view is that those are very good if you're working the opponent down or you're getting their attention, and sometimes we throw those. But for myself, and this is only my understanding, my impression, what I like to do, I prefer, instead of throwing the thigh, the kick to the thigh, I would throw the ball of the foot. See, all of my kicks are either the bottom of the heel, where I'm getting a good hard surface, or the ball of the foot, or, since I always have on shoes, I'm going to just take that toe and stick it in. Now, why would I give up a toe sticking into a person for a shin? That's only my opinion and my particular like and dislike. So you're free to adapt your art any way you want to, but if you had the question, why am I not doing this or that, throwing the spin kicks, throwing that, just like throwing a spinning back fist. Now, spinning back fist is a terrific technique. If the person is coming in at you, you step back out of the way, and spin and hit. That's a terrific and is great for self-defense as well, especially if you have a guy coming in, maybe grabbing at you, and you spin and you hit with the elbow. Say again, terrific technique. Now, you might say, well, why are we not tying up here and throwing our knees in against our opponent, or throwing in the elbows? Well, if you know how to throw in your punches here, the punch becomes the elbow. If you can throw a kick, the kick becomes the knee. So it's not like we're not doing it or we can't do it. It's just that we have a preference not to do it because it is very violent when two buddies are out here sparring. Now, if you make a pact with your partner and you have on enough gear and you want to throw in some of those knees and elbows, they do the same damage as a kick and as a punch, except the elbow has a tendency to cut a little bit more, and the knee has a larger surface, so you get a little more penetration sometimes, a little more concussion as you're striking. Those are things to work on, but usually when we do them, it's when we're in the trap boxing range, and we'll just kind of stick them in there. Okay? And it's not like you really see them coming, we just kind of put them in there. But right now, we're going to work on just the kicking, the punching, and the trap boxing, meaning that we'll do some stand-up grappling. We're not getting down on the ground at all. Okay, Ian, let's go ahead and start throwing out some techniques. And as we do, remember we can kick, we can punch. If we want to, we can move in tight and try some of the trap boxing techniques. Okay, kind of caught you sleeping there, didn't I? Nice way to do it. Okay, and what we're doing is much of what we've been doing, again, establishing control. Use the same game plan each time. Find out what the opponent, where their weakness is, and capitalize on that. Now I can see he's kind of stepping forward here. Watch what I'm going to do. Okay, now I just kind of picked that up as he was moving in. He was kind of throwing his jab. He was very tentative on it. It's like he was afraid that I'd come over the top and hit him. And when he did that, he'd put that foot right out in front of him. And when I saw the foot come out and notice the angle of the body, that says to me, foot sweep. Okay, so that's what I went in on. And if you do this enough, you'll pick up on it. So imagine being in a self-defense situation where a guy comes up and takes a particular stance or whatever, or approaches you in a certain manner. You've been through it hundreds of times here in a spontaneous and unrehearsed manner. This is the exact same thing. This is as close as you can get. We had talked about 4 phases of learning. We talked about lecture demonstration, then we went to dramatization. That is, you just pretend to do the technique on your own. And then we went to simulated experience, in which we had a person hold up focus pads and we'd actually hit those focus pads. Or the self-defense pre-arranged sparring, where a person would throw in a punch and I would trap it and follow through. That's simulated. That's like the real thing. And then we have hands-on. Hands-on is where we're out here and we're actually getting hit. If you've never been hit, you just don't know what your reaction is going to be. I've had people that I've sparred with, big guys sometimes, and we'd spar around, and I'd throw a hook and hit them in the head, and they literally drop their hands down and start going, oh, I didn't know you were going to hit me so hard. Well, in self-defense, if you don't know that you can take a punch or a hit or whatever, you're really giving yourself a disadvantage. So that's the reason, again, Jeet Kune is about realistic combat. And this is as realistic as you can hope to get. You can start throwing in more elbows. You could have one person take off their gloves and take off their foot gear and really throw in the power. And it might be that you get a little bit closer. But still yet, the mechanics are the same. I have to get my cue. I have to see what he's doing. If his hands are down, it says to me, punch high. It says to me, punch high if he has on 400 pounds of gear, if he has his head fully protected, if my hands are completely free, I get the exact same cue, hit. In a self-defense situation, when his hands are down and I have to defend myself, it says hit. So it's the same thing. Regardless of how you're geared up here, you have to be able to follow through. And in this particular case, we have on a minimum of gear, so we're free to move as little gear as possible so that we're free to move around. Now, we don't have any body protection because, hey, when you get hit in the stomach, it doesn't kill you. You don't die. When you get hit in the head, you don't die. You roll with the technique and move back and forth. So we've practiced this until we've got it at a level to where we feel very comfortable. And if we were to take the gear off altogether in a self-defense, street fight, confrontation, assuming that my partner was intelligent enough to not just kind of throw his hands out, I mean, he actually had some skill, well, it would be no problem. If he had no skill at all, he's actually going for what we call PIA, Progressive Indirect Attack. He has a change-up. He's hard to kind of distinguish because you just don't know what he's going to do, what he's capable of. A lot of times he'll go like this and punch like that. So it really is something that you're used to because you've been through any number of different situations here. So as we're moving around, sometimes I'll just stop. Now see, I just saw that stomach right there as he started to switch position. And that said to me, hit him. And the minute I hit him, I knew that he was going to come back with a kick, and I started to go with an oblique kick, but I stopped to think about it. So as we're moving around here, and we're doing this nice and light, and I'm thinking what directions I'm going to go here, what type of kicks and punches and such. Now, at this point, I might want to start moving in, and again, I can't make it happen. Okay? I just have to go with it. But if I start moving in, I'm going to get into that trap boxing range. I'm going to try to grapple. Now, Ian's pretty quick here, so I can't just run in on him. But what I do is put my hand up there. Once I've controlled that head, he's still working, as you can see. Now, he's not working hard because we're filming this, but that puts me in position to control. Now, what I did, since I just rushed him, he was pretty much expecting me to come back in. Instead, I threw a kick. So I'm continually varying between kicking range, punching range, and the trap boxing range. Okay, we're moving. There was a little leg kick for you. That's it. And right now, because I've been trying to talk through the tape, I'm not really thinking about a plan, so I immediately go back and establish my jab. See, if I don't have a plan, the first thing I want to do is establish my position. And there goes my straight lead punch. And the minute I find my punch is working and getting an opening for him, then I'll throw in a kick. I'll throw in a sweep. I want to be able to stay back here and pick my shots. And if my opponent doesn't know what's coming off, I'm in control. That time I just used my footwork to stop him, to fake him out, so that he wouldn't know exactly what to expect. And you can see we're not going at it too hard here. We're just kind of relaxing as we go through it. Here comes another progressive indirect attack. There was the opening again. And imagine if you get used to 500 different openings and as many cues, you're just about ready for anything. Anything that's standing up anyway. And that's what Jeet Kune is about. It's a stand-up fighting art. Okay, Ian. Good job. And we'll come back and we'll talk just a little bit more about our program.
As you can see, this type of full contact fighting takes a lot out of you. It's certainly an enjoyable activity to get involved in, and I hope you enjoy doing things like that. Let me again go over the fact that you have to be safe as you perform this. It's easy to get injured. Wear headgear, mouthpiece, groin protection, shin guards. The more equipment that you can get on, a lot of times the better off you are, especially when you're first starting out. Now, if you see something on the tape, because we were kind of trying to talk through most of it, if you see something that you like, well, hit that rewind button and play it again until you get it. The first time I used videotapes to try to learn something, I would take a 5-minute segment and I would play it every day until I got it up in my mind and I felt like
this is exactly how to perform it, and I could play it in my mind anytime I wanted to. And after I was able to do that, I would get in front of a mirror, get out and spar, and I could make it work for me. So if you'd like to do some of the techniques and make them your own, let me encourage you to play a few minutes of it, get it down to where you feel comfortable with it, and then it becomes your technique. In the late 1960s or so, when I first became aware of Jeet Kune Do, I thought of it as a full contact fighting style. And in fact, that's what set it apart from everything else. That Bruce Lee was practicing his art full contact. He actually hit people. And that, again, set Jeet Kune Do apart. Now, what I've tried to do over the years is maintain that feeling that full contact, this contact fighting, is where I want to go with my Jeet Kune Do. There are a lot of people that teach Jeet Kune Do. There are a lot of interpretations of it. This was only one interpretation. If you're interested in it, and quite a few people have contacted me about it, we've decided to develop an organization, the International Junfan Kickboxing Association. I'll talk about that and the different recommendations and certifications in just a minute.
With the introduction of this series on Jeet Kune Do scientific street fighting and our emphasis on the Junfan kickboxing, we've decided to introduce the International Junfan Kickboxing Association. Now, we've already been contacted by groups in Europe and in Australia and across the United States about getting involved in our Junfan Kickboxing Association. We've developed a number of different levels that you can perform if you want to become a member of the organization. First of all, we have the student membership. Now, the student membership will be available to individuals that have 1 to 2 years of instruction, and they can also test in Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Phase 1 being a general beginner level type of basic techniques from Tape 1. Phase 2, continuing some of the theories in Tape 2, and then by Tape 3, they should have the ability to do levels 1, 2, and 4. That's just technique sparring and body punching and kicking and punching to the body. So it'd be nice and safe for the individuals, and they can pick up the kickboxing method that we're teaching here. For individuals that already have some karate or kung fu or taekwondo training and they feel comfortable with the contact and such, they may want to get involved as an assistant chapter leader. Now, this would be for individuals that have a small group, perhaps in their karate school or taekwondo school, or perhaps have a small training group that they'd like to work together, 5, 10, 15 people. And the assistant chapter leader would be involved in training and also teaching the student the skills, which would incorporate tapes 1 through 4, and also levels of sparring 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, that would all be the body sparring, the trap boxing, kickboxing, and boxing maneuvers. There is testing here. Phase 1, the basic techniques again at a higher level. Phase 2, the ability to move around and start doing these sparring techniques. And Phase 3, some actual competency at these first 5 levels. Sometimes we'll have people that come in at the black belt level. They already have accomplishment at the kickboxing. They've picked up the Junfan technology, the ways of attack, the trapping, the oblique kick, the way that we enter and such. And those people may want to come in at associate chapter leader. The associate chapter leader is designed for, again, an instructor who's had a small group that's interested in teaching and wants to come in and work with us in the International Junfan Kickboxing Association. The associate chapter leader should have about 5 years of training in this field of kickboxing. Once you have the kickboxing down, it's not that hard to adapt the student into the Junfan method of kickboxing. Okay? And the person should have the ability to perform levels 1 through 9. So that's all 9 levels that we've covered here in terms of the full contact fighting. There's also phase testing 1, 2, and 3, so we can ensure that each of the instructors is at a high level and understands what to teach and how to work with the the students. We'll also be talking to our chapter leaders about the educational process, how to teach and how to get across the instruction so the students can pick it up quickly and efficiently. And then we also have the full chapter leader. Now, the chapter leader would have to serve as an associate chapter leader first of all, and this person would have 6 to 8 years of training in the actual kickboxing method now, and then 1 to 3 years at the associate level. Of course, I mentioned we've already had people talking to us from Europe and across the United States, and many of those people have a certain level of expertise already, so they're ready to come in as chapter leader. And then we have our highest designation, which would be a senior chapter leader. That would be a person responsible for an area, perhaps a region, which they would go around and do the testing for these beginners. So if you're interested in getting involved with this on more of a full-time basis and picking up the Jeet Kune from the International Junfan Kickboxing Association, I hope that you would write us according to the address that we'll have available here at the end of the tape. Now, this completes our series 1 through 5 on Jeet Kune, scientific street fighting, with our emphasis and interpretation of the Junfan kickboxing. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I hope you'll stick with it. So keep training. My name is Jerry Beasley, and for Panther Productions, thanks very much.